Hey friends, if you like the Nexus Podcast, the best way to continue the learning is to join our community. There are 3 ways to do that. First, you can join the Nexus Pro membership. It's our global community of smart building professionals. We have monthly events, paywall deep dive content, and a private chat room, and it's just $35 a month. Second, you can upgrade from the Pro membership to our courses offering. It's headlined by our flagship course, The Smart Building Strategist, and we're building a catalog of courses taught by world-leading experts on each topic under the Smart Buildings umbrella. Third, and finally, our marketplace is how we connect leading vendors with buyers looking for their solutions. The links are below in the show notes, and now let's go on to the podcast. Welcome back to the Nexus Podcast. It's James here. I have Brad. We're missing Rosie this week.
Hello.
Rosie's on vacation. And then we have a special guest who I'll introduce in just a second. This podcast is designed to give you a preview of everything going on in our content, at our events, and obviously what we're doing right now at Nexus. So if you want the full experience, though, this is just a preview. Go over to our website and sign up for the newsletter. And that will give you everything we publish each week, along with everything going on with our events. Our special guest today is Devan Tracy, Smart Buildings lead at Lockheed Martin. Devan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, James and Brad. Great to be here. I have been with Lockheed for 12 years. My background is mechanical engineering, got a PE in HVAC, and I started the Smart Buildings program, I think back in 2018. We modeled ours after Google. I had the opportunity to meet Daryl Smith back in the day, and we've been going ever since, starting with FDD and expanding out to other industrial Internet of Things technologies. So I love Nexus and huge supporter of this community.
And you guys have, thanks to yourself and all your hard work and your team, obviously, you guys have one of the most mature smart buildings programs out there. So we've been thinking a lot about where all of the building owners in our community, where they sit in terms of maturity of their programs. And what we learned last year at NexusCon was that a lot of building owners showed up. We had over 62 organizations. A lot of building owners showed up and were kind of like deer in headlights a little bit, like hadn't really got their programs off the ground. And I think yours, they can look at and say like, well, where can we be in 8 years? And it's probably fun for you to look back on the journey.
It is. Yeah, it started out with just me, and we proved the value pretty quickly. And then the need for a team to actually sustain the program was realized pretty quickly that this you can't just wave a magic wand and hope that the technology will fix everything. And so that's been crucial to our success.
All right. Well, we're excited to get into some AI stuff with you in just a second. Let's talk about what's been going on at Nexus. We've been on vacation a little bit, so all of us took a couple of weeks off. We're kind of resting up for a big push ahead of NexusCon this year. Brad, you wanna talk about what's been going on?
Yeah. I mean, apologies for the delay in the podcast publishing here. I know, like, when I listen to podcasts a lot and then someone doesn't produce on their regular schedule, you're like, what's going on? So, yeah, we were enjoying our July, but we're back in the saddle now, getting ready for NexusCon. Aside from that, we do have some pretty exciting new partnerships. We've been working with some companies that are really leaders in the space that we're excited about. Just to rattle off a couple, we're working with MacDonald Miller, which is a big mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC controls provider in the Pacific Northwest. So they're kind of our first, like, we're calling it technology-enabled services partner. They're really like they're a leading provider of adding these technologies like FDD into the services that they're offering to their clients, which is really cool. We're partnering with Arup, which is a massive consultant, but they've got a really cool smart buildings division that's doing amazing stuff, helping big commercial real estate owners get to their outcomes by, creating a data layer and getting all their data in one place and putting smart applications above that. And then lastly, J2 Innovations as well, which is a Siemens company, and they're doing HVAC controls in a way that kind of no one else is. I mean, maybe James, you can add something there. I know you just talked to Scott, but the way that they are enabling the entire technology stack at the HVAC control layer is pretty unique.
Yep. Yep. We will talk about them at some point in more detail. I think it's really cool how they templatize a control system. So
Yeah.
the old world of controls, and it was funny talking to Scott a couple different times, but he's been doing this for 30 years. But it's funny to talk about how this is like cutting edge. But the old controls world is that you might program a VAV to talk to an air handler, and the programmer might do that like they're doing it from scratch, right? And it might be this like custom expensive solution, and they're developing the ability to just say, well, you know what, that's a VAV with hot water reheat. It's talking to this air handler, and the system just basically does programming, graphics, alarms, FDD, points, all of that based off of predetermined templates. Because as we know, the systems are the same across buildings. There's just a little bit of variation. And so using the ability for templates and wizards and we did a podcast with them, like going through that a couple of years ago that people can go check out. Yeah. I think it's really cool to have McDonald Miller as a partner. It's our first sort of regional contractor to come in and say like, I want to tell smart building stories, which is really, really cool to see. The investment in smart buildings from, we expected to see it more and more, but it's not a startup with a venture-backed marketing department that is doing this. It's them basically saying like, here's our role in the ecosystem, and I think that's really cool.
We just watched them demonstrate how they kind of pitch their FDD solution to a new building owner, and it's spectacular. Like just the way that they've integrated FDD into all their services. So there's a fault, and like they're taking care of it before anybody even knows that it's an issue. It's pretty incredible. They're cutting edge on that for sure.
Awesome. All right, let's jump into what we've published in the last few weeks. While we took some time off, we didn't stop publishing, so we have a good couple of essays. If you were also on summer vacation, definitely come check these essays out. Brad, you want to start with the AI one?
Yeah, sure. So this was for our digitizing operations and maintenance audience, so like facility managers, those type of people. Um, it's funny. I was thinking back to NexusCon 2024, and we sort of avoided the term AI because there was so much hype around it. Like everyone was just saying it, and no one really knew what they were talking about. And the amount it's changed now that we have like so many real world examples. So that's kind of what inspired this piece. Is like just demystify how people are using AI for facility management to somebody who might not be like deep in the weeds with it every day.
When you say AI, you're talking about what has been built on top of the generative AI wave. I think some of the people that commented on this piece were telling us to basically remember that we've been using regression modeling and expert systems like FDD for decades. It's not like we're saying like this is now AI, right? We're just saying like here's the ways in which generative AI is being,
Totally.
integrated in with products
Yeah,
today.
I know exactly what you're talking about. There was some good points brought up about how regression models have been used in the past, and I made a big infographic about like the different versions of this, and that comment made me think you could actually do like a fork of this infographic is where like AI in terms of like LLMs and ChatGPT
Yeah,
came into the industry, but there's this other fork where like regression models have been doing similar things for
yeah.
decades. So totally recognize that. Valid point. Um, when I did a deep dive, this is not like a industry standard, but my brain thought there's three versions that I saw in terms of like how FMs are applying generative AI and agentic AI today. Again, aside from the regression models. So just really quick, version one is like your standard, just using ChatGPT or Gemini as your support throughout your job, which is effective, but it doesn't know anything about your building. It's just answering questions. It can't make decisions. And then we're seeing a lot of technology vendors who are adding retrieval augmented generation on top of that. So think about like an LLM like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, but it also knows all this data that's in your building at your data layer. Like, I don't know what the set points were yesterday and what the temperatures were yesterday and what the fault codes were yesterday. So the information it's giving you back is much more rich with what is relevant for your building. And then last, I put my version 3 as when agentic AI comes in. And I see agentic AI as, simply put, it's starting to make decisions for you. So if it knows something's wrong with the building, it can actually react to that and either make a command or integrate or force a workflow to occur so that someone has to go out and do some maintenance. So check out the article and let me know what you think. But that's one of the big reasons we wanted to get Devan in here, is because Devan, I know you were gonna, at NexusCon, you're going to talk a little bit how Lockheed's starting to, get into this and using AI for operations and maintenance. So what did you think? Does this article apply to the way you guys are doing it? How are you guys doing it? What can you tell us?
Absolutely. I liked how you broke up the different versions. And I would say at Lockheed, we're between version 1 and 2 right now. We're on the simpler end, but I think there's a lot of value to be harvested there. So I don't think there's any rush for us to try to jump to version 4 when we haven't even scratched the surface on version 2. I would say I agree with your vision, Brad, kind of where the industry's going with self-healing buildings, wayfinding for assets. I remember seeing, I think Brainbox did a video where they had a technician driving to an air handling unit on the roof, and while they were driving, they pinged Aria and were asking, what year, what model, what's wrong with it, what alarms, what filter do I need to bring up? And so see that in the future, but I also see so many gaps in the underlying data set. And I think that's one of the other articles we're going to get to. So, again, that's why we're really focusing on the basics. I'll share a couple examples. So, we're going through a huge risk and resiliency exercise right now for maintenance, and we're really honing in on what are our critical assets. And back to basics. What is our spare parts plan? What are the criticalities? And so we are using our internal LLM to help fill in some of those gaps, to help create a draft troubleshooting guide, to help create a draft PM plan. What spare parts do we need? How often do we need to maintain that asset? So that's one example. A second example I would say is querying building code. So, for example, we'll put in a prompt, I'm a facilities engineer. I need to utilize UFC when designing specs for a facility. What type of piping should I use according to UFC? And also include the reference, right? A lot of trust but verify types of activities. I would also say we are using our internal LLM to summarize survey results that we get, those basically iPads you would see out in the airports. We have similar setup, and there's just too many responses to go through manually. So that's a really low hanging fruit example. Writing job recs, I mean, that applies to any industry. Writing scripts for videos that we're creating. I should say drafting, not writing, right? And then a lot of bluff, like the bottom line up front for an executive who has no idea what LoRaWAN is. Let's utilize that to help quickly summarize that in a couple bullets. So
Hmm.
again, a lot of value at the simple level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go back to the surveys? Who's taking the surveys?
Employees building, uh yeah,
Occupants.
we put them in occupants. Thank you. We're putting them in cafeterias, break rooms, bathrooms.
And then what do you do with that data? Um, and how does that sort of feed into the program?
So one of our interns actually just created a chatbot to automatically process the data weekly, summarize some of the key complaints, and that goes back to the site lead at each facility for them to react to. And we specifically said we can't just put these surveys out there if we're not planning to do anything with them, because people will stop responding, obviously. So
Hmm.
that's the current process.
Cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Really cool. So what does it look like as you guys try to like go to what Brad is calling stage 2 or getting into that rag world?
Definitely filling in the data gaps. I mean, our buildings are, I think 50% of them are 50 years or older. And we have not done a great job documenting standards, documenting design specs. And so, in order to get to what Brad was talking about, I think we're going to need to stand up a team to one, maybe two teams. One to work on what's the process from now moving forward for any new builds, and then how do we start to clean up our backlog in a strategic way, because we're not going to be able to handle everything, but probably based on criticality.
The scary part about that too is, for anyone who's using LLMs a lot knows that they're all probability based and they don't tell you that they don't know something. They just fill it in with their best guess. So if you're concerned about the data from your RAG model and now you're feeding that with an LLM that's just going to give you its best answer, it could be hard to uncover what's real and what's not real if you're already worried about the underlying data, because it's going to try to answer the question. It's not going to say, I don't know, we don't have that information on that unit, which is kind of scary.
Yeah. And we actually had a deep dive in person last week. All the controls engineers for our business area got together and we were like, okay, this is the standard moving forward. And we're going to agree and hold the vendors to it anytime we do a BMS upgrade, et cetera. And so that was pretty cool. That was our first kind of data cleansing exercise as a beyond just my team, to that extended out to the controls engineers.
So that's a great segue. I feel like we should go into the next article here. This is an article that I wrote, published in June, I think it was. Before there's in my brain, it's before vacation and after vacation. This was definitely before vacation, um, and it's called AI Won't Fix Your Building's Data: How to Actually Make It Useful. And we started out on this when we started put this in our editorial calendar and started planning out this piece. It was originally supposed to be called Dirty Jobs, the dirty job of cleaning up dirty data in your building. It's kind of what you're describing. And when I did the interviews, I sort of interviewed three or four experts as part of this, and what each of them kept saying is like, AI is not actually going to solve this problem here, and it makes a lot of sense. It's like it doesn't know what that sensor that's mislabeled is. Like AI is never going to be able to figure that out. It might be able to take a well-named point and add tags to it, but it's not going to be able to do something with that piece of data with no label or with no modeling or with no relationships added to the data. It definitely can't, and like you're saying, Devan, in the 50-year-old buildings with a lack of digital systems, it definitely can't do anything there, right? And so the article is about sort of building this data model of your building up over time, and it's actually it's unfortunate from where we're at in industry, but it's kind of the building owner's responsibility, because right now the vendors aren't necessarily taking that responsibility across projects. And sometimes, as you're saying, your meeting that happened last week or whenever, the control system's not being installed with the data model coming with it, right? It's like the contractors are not taking that as one of their pieces of responsibility. And so this article is about, what vendors are doing, what building owners need to be doing to like basically stand up for themselves and make it so that they have this clean set of data, and more specifically the data model that then enables AI applications to sit on top of it, right? It sounds like a lot of what you've been thinking about right now, Devan.
Yes, spot on. What is going to incentivize vendors to do that, in your opinion?
I think nothing. And I think what's going to solve the problem is that it's just simply built into the workflows of like, I can't set this control system up without one of the outputs being a model that fully explains the data here. And so in the article we quoted Scott from J2 Innovations. That's how the system works. When you set up the control system, it automatically sets up haystack tags for your data, right? 75F does the same thing. I think if we dug harder, we could probably find other control systems that do that as well. We also quoted and cited normal framework. So Stephen Dawson Haggerty talked about how you can't set up the data layer, or you can't set up the integration gateway without also modeling and tagging at the same time. So just like baking those into the deployment workflows. FDD is the same way, right? You can't set up FDD without modeling the data. But what we're trying to do is basically incentivize the players to do it further and further down the stack, right? So that there's not so much effort higher up the stack.
It's such a good segue from the last article. Like if you just started at the like, oh, let's just push AI into this, and like the hot take is if you don't have your data layer set up, or you don't have an ontology that makes sense, like AI is just going to expose all of that because you're just going to be asking questions about data that doesn't make any sense. So yeah. The other one that came to mind was onboard data. When you were listing companies who are doing this, they got a pretty cool tool of like put your whatever data you have into their system, and it'll work through that to create Haystack and Google DB with probabilities of like what each point should be named in those ontologies, which is pretty cool.
We've reached a point in our company's growth where Brad has seen vendors demos and I haven't, so I actually don't. I don't know about that yet. So I'm excited to learn about it.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it. We'll check it out.
So Devan, when you think about like making this happen in all the buildings that you guys are renovating slash managing and not planning on renovating, how are you thinking about this like roadmap of building out that model over time?
Yeah, I mean, just to hear that some vendors are starting to do this is huge because it is an unsustainable amount of work to play catch up on, like you were
Hmm.
saying. And so to be able to just say, I want Project Haystack or Brick or whatever, and build in that whole model from the beginning, just to have vendors understand what that means and do it, I think is a big first step. We've
Yeah.
had Haystack in our requirements for several years, and oftentimes we've had to explain to them what that is. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the most basic level of what you're talking about.
Yeah. So then it's like, do they know what it is? Step one. And is their system capable of exposing those tags? Step two. Um, yeah. Fascinating. One of the things that came up in the interviews that I learned just by writing this article is that there's this gray area that Andrew Rogers called digital commissioning. And so you have a lot of times you'll have your commissioning agent if you've chosen to have a commissioning agent on your project. Um, you have an MSI usually if you've chosen to have an MSI on your project. But even if you pay for both of those scopes of work, you still might have this middle ground where the commissioning agent is thinking from a sequence of operations and mechanical, is this mechanical system operating properly? And the MSI is thinking about, are these systems that are supposed to be talking to each other properly? Okay, great. But we still miss this middle ground which is, how is the data modeled and is that data model set up properly? And so Andrew brought up like we actually need more scope. Like it's not necessarily just about convincing building owners to do the commissioning, and it's not just about convincing them to have an MSI. It's also about like maybe there's this like extra piece of scope that needs to happen so that when you hand over the building, it has a data model that comes with it as well. Yeah.
That's so true. Like when I think about traditional commissioning, I think about uh, the commissioning agent going underneath the elevator and seeing that when the leak detector gets a little bit of water on it, the screen highlights that the leak detector's on. And that
Yeah.
tells you nothing about any of the point names and how they'd be identified in other systems or anything like that. So it's a real gap still, for sure.
Yep. Yep. We can do it. It's not hopeless.
So
All right.
I have one more question for Devin on that before we move
Yeah.
on. I'm
Okay.
just curious, like if one of your technology vendors or a new technology vendor came to you today and pitched that they have this LLM with RAG built into their system, is that appealing to you today, or are you like, man, we have too much to do at our data layer that we're like, I don't believe that it's going to work for us yet. We need to do more at the
Mm.
data layer.
I honestly don't think we could trust it, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
like you were saying, it's going to start making decisions based on so many assumptions. And if it makes one bad decision, that thing is going to be shut off, right? Especially if it's in a politically critical area or one of our production areas with critical specs. So
Mhm.
I think to get to that point, we have a lot of work to do on our end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
Cool.
All right,
I
let's
wish
go.
we could wave the magic wand.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Let's go to our last article briefly, Brad. So you published. We did a building owner meetup in June on space utilization technology, and Brad, you then wrote an article about the top 5 takeaways from that discussion. So take it away.
Yeah, sure. So building owner meetups, if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard me talk about them before, but we get a big Zoom meeting room full of just building owners to talk about a very particular topic, and then they do breakout rooms. So you've got 2 building owners who may have never met before who find out that they're working on exactly the same problem and are exchanging notes. It's pretty cool. We're doing one on August 20th, I believe, on AI for facilities and operations. So basically what we've been talking about here. So watch out for the invite for that. But the one in June was about space utilization. And Devan, we were excited to have you as part of this podcast because you were a big part of that conversation. And when I went back through my notes about what everyone was talking about, my first biggest takeaway was that people or building owners who are doing space utilization well, every single one started by leveraging kind of what they already had. It's not like they had nothing and they're like, fill every room with sensors, then we'll have space utilization. They kind of like almost MacGyvered the beginning of it with all these different ways that they could get data about where people are using spaces. So I thought maybe you could talk for a bit about, I mean, please let us know what you thought about the building owner meetup, but specifically the examples that you guys brought up with what you're doing with your smart restrooms, I thought was, very pertinent to leveraging what's there.
Yeah, toilet flushes as a proxy for occupancy is something I hadn't heard before.
Yeah. So I thought that that meetup was, there was a lot of healthy discussion, right? Everyone wasn't like, oh, let's go sensorize everything before we even know what to do with the data. There were a lot of opinions on both sides. And I did bring up the flushes and the hand washing data points that we already have. So might as well use that. We've been using badge data for a while. I mean, before that, we literally sent space planners around to count people in seats. So we've at least we've matured beyond that. Badging data, at least for space planning, is typically all you need. But I do think we have more opportunity to do set point adjustments based on the occupancy. But also, why don't we, if we're already monitoring carbon dioxide, does that get us close enough to the needle? So I think we really need to assess how big are the gaps before we just go about sensorizing everything. Because maybe we'd rather spend that money on vibration sensors on, all the critical pumps versus do we really care about knowing to that granular detail?
Yeah. I just want to ask a nerdy question, which is how do you digitize toilet flushes?
I don't and I'm not going to say the vendor, but because I don't think I could say it, but it's all just built into the flush valve.
Oh, okay. Got it. All
Yeah,
right.
And so
we had
you
to
have
retrofit the flush valve. And we're not going to do that retroactively, but we did say any new bathroom, we're going to install these. But
Okay.
is
also for
that,
it has leak detection capabilities as well.
got it.
Okay.
Is that
Yeah.
We don't
connected to
actually care
your,
about when people are flushing the toilets.
is that actively connected to your maintenance plan? So like you have janitors who are getting alarms that this bathroom's been used X amount of times?
Yes. And the idea is to use that to help prioritize their time and maybe, skip a bathroom if there was only one person in it all day.
Hmm. Cool. That's what one use case of space utilization is smarter maintenance for your bathrooms. And I went back through that building owner meetup and I came up with 19 that I put on the infographic in this article, which is crazy. Like you talk about space utilization and some people kind of don't know what that means. It's because it can mean so many different things with what you're going to do for that data. One other really creative one that I heard during that building owner meetup that I hadn't heard before is providing the fire department with real time occupancy during an emergency. So you can imagine like something happens, the fire marshal shows up, and you can hand that person a tablet that shows like this is where people are in the building. I mean, you could imagine how how much that's going to help them in their
Oh,
job
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You created a really cool, people that are thinking about spatialization should definitely check out Brad's infographic from that article. It displays all 19 of those in a cool way.
And I want someone to tell me one that's not on here. That's my challenge. I want to hear what the 20th one is.
But again, for that example, it's like, can we just use our phones in the emergency situation?
Yeah.
Not that the company's going to track every minute, but in an emergency, have the permission to track that way.
I think this is a big like tension point right now in this. We've been writing about workplace tech for 6 months now, and when I talk to the building owners, it's all about what can I use without sensors, and you talk to the vendors, it's all about why you need new sensors, and it's just like we're seeing both sides, and it's like, well, wait a second, you guys aren't exactly talking about the same thing here.
That's a great point.
So that's another way in which we are sitting in the middle.
Maybe that's a idea for sensor providers to also be providing consultative services for how they can use what's already there for certain parts of what they're doing. Because I really
Yeah.
like that point. That's
Yeah.
definitely what
Yeah.
we're seeing.
It speaks to the importance of the data layer, right? Because like I think I wrote an article about this in 2021, all the different ways you could get occupancy data. In this case, toilet data as a proxy for occupancy data. But basically, you need some way to basically aggregate all of that and figure out what the best signal for occupancy is for a given space. Because Devan, you guys might have different buildings that don't have those flush valves installed, right?
Right.
Yes. And you might have some other badge data over there, or you might go to a different building and it's got a different badge system or whatever. And you need to be the ability to aggregate all of that together. Kind of speaks back to the data model, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that one?
It's a whole nother topic, but there was also a really good discussion around the tension between landlords and tenants when it comes to space utilization, because they both want the data, but it's also kind of a negotiation. It helps each one of them with negotiation if they have it and the other doesn't, right? So you're about to renew your lease. If the landlord knows you're not using the space, they come into that negotiation differently. And if the tenant knows they need more space, they come into that differently. So it's like they can both benefit from it, but they don't really want to share it yet. It's a pretty interesting dynamic there for a lot of the commercial real estate land.
Yeah, and I think we put them in the same breakout room, the occupiers and
We did.
landlords.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's move to carve outs and close out this conversation. So carve outs are something that's just more fun from your personal life. Could be a book, podcast, new album, have all been shared. I'll go first. So I was in Hawaii and I read this book called The Overstory by Richard Powers, and it's fiction. And I don't read a lot of fiction. I generally, when I'm reading, I'm like trying to teach myself how to run a company for the first time. And this time I was like in the plane or on the beach, just reading this novel, and I cannot recommend this novel enough. It's about trees, but it's about humans' relationship with trees, and it goes all the way from like, and it's not historical fiction, but it's based on things that have actually happened. Like it covers the Pacific Northwest timber wars, Brad, which you may have read about, that happened in the late 80s and 90s, like before you were born. People were fighting over these old growth trees in
Yeah.
the Pacific Northwest, and it tells this story over decades. Maybe it's 500 pages or whatever, but like it's kind of like telling the story of humans from the perspective of trees while telling the story of trees from the perspective of humans all at once. And it mixes in all these different people's stories all together. It's just fascinating. And he's written other books as well, and I'm going to move on to those. There's one about the ocean, and yeah. So The Overstory by Richard Powers, definitely check it out if you
That
want
sounds great.
a change of pace. Yes.
I'll add it to my list.
Yeah, I
And
like it.
I will also plug reading a book and then talking to ChatGPT about that book. So I finished the book. The flight home from Hawaii is 6 hours. I finished the book with 5 hours to go, and I'm not kidding you guys. I bought internet on the plane so that I could talk to ChatGPT about trees, and I literally talked to ChatGPT for like 4 of the remaining 5 hours about trees. So
Wow.
I know all about the timber wars. I know so much. So
That's awesome.
ask me later.
Devin, you want to go next?
Sure, that's great. I also asked ChatGPT to remind me what some of my book was about because I've been reading this one page at a time, basically, because I don't want it to end.
Ah,
But it's called Joyful by Ingrid Lee, and the subtitle is The Surprising Power of Ordinary Things to Create Extraordinary Happiness.
hmm.
I also love reading nonfiction, as James, you were saying, and I love studying happiness and joy. And she's actually an interior designer. So a lot of the book is how do you design spaces to inspire joy, whether that's the colors that you choose or the shapes of objects, but then also things like looking at the clouds for a few minutes. Or
Hmm.
my favorite is watching the sunset every night. It's free art, and I'm gonna do that tonight for my birthday. So I love I love just these gentle reminders
Did you
of
say for your
finding joy
birthday?
every day.
It's your birthday today?
It's my birthday today.
Oh my gosh! Happy
Oh, you're
birthday!
spending your birthday with us. That's awesome.
Wow, I'm glad.
You're
I like how you slipped that in there right at the end of the podcast.
yeah,
That it is in fact your
it's in
birthday.
fact your birthday. Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, happy birthday, Devin.
Yeah, happy
We'll
birthday.
Thank you.
spare the listeners Brad and I's singing voice and just tell
Yeah,
you happy
no one
birthday.
wants that. Yeah.
My birthday was on Saturday, so I'm a fellow Leo.
Oh,
Dang, I didn't know
be
that
belated.
either. Happy birthday,
Thank you.
James.
Yes, thank you. All right, Brad, you want to go?
Yeah, I got a fun fact. So I was also in Hawaii. I was not with James. I'd never
Different
been to
islands.
Hawaii before. I went to Kauai, which it was spectacular. We had a great time. But if you've never been to Kauai, the fun fact about Kauai is that there's chickens everywhere, like literally everywhere. And so I did a small amount of research to figure out what the story was there. And apparently, like in the late 80s, there was a pretty bad hurricane that released all the chickens from their coops, and they started to crossbreed and breed with like feral birds. But really, the big story is there's no predators there. A lot of the other islands, they introduced mongoose to take care of rat populations, rat infestations, but they don't have the mongoose on Kauai. So, I mean, we were like 5 miles into a jungle hike, and there's like a rooster that like walks across the trail. It's wild. They're everywhere. So you can always tell someone who just got to the island too, because like they'll be there and they'll be like, "Whoa, look at all those chickens!" And like you definitely only say that for the first like 6 hours you're there until you realize that
Because you
they're
see so many.
literally everywhere. But it's kind of cool. It's like on all of their souvenir stuff and stuff. They've embraced the chicken as kind of their mascot.
Yeah, yeah. I was on Oahu, and there's also lots of chickens there, but they do have the mongoose. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
All right. This has been a fun convo. Thanks for joining us on your birthday, Devin.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. Appreciate all the insights.
Okay, friends, thank you for listening to this episode. As we continue to grow our global community of changemakers, we need your help. For the next couple of months, we're challenging our listeners to share a link to their favorite Nexus episode on LinkedIn with a short post about why you listen. It would really, really help us out. Make sure to tag us in the post so we can see it. Have a good one.